Welcome to the Relationship Cycle with Jorge and Nelsa, where we discuss dating and other significant relationships. Hello, Poppy. Welcome back, everyone, to the Relationship Cycle with Jorge and Nelsa.
Hello, Sunshine. How are you?
I am awesome, and I am so excited to dig into today's topic because we have gotten some really fire responses on our Facebook post, and just the research was fascinating on this topic. Today, we're talking about withholding intimacy. And Poppy, I hope that you will go into this first with the definition because you put some stuff out there for some of our listeners on the Facebook post that, first of all, I thought, wow, we do need to break down what do we mean when we say intimacy, first of all.
Agreed. And I think that, honestly, on the surface, I think a lot of people associate intimacy into just sexual stuff.
Right.
And, while kind of, doing some digging and research for the topic, like we always do to come prepared and also to kind of
Mm-hmm.
give our own personal perspective, I became aware that there is different versions of intimacy, and also obviously a lot of it is how we interpret it, like a lot of stuff in life. But
Mm-hmm.
let's go through the different levels of intimacy. So we have emotional intimacy, which is a deep feeling of closeness and trust,
Mm-hmm.
and you can have this, with friends, platonic, friendships, relatives, and whatnot, and obviously romantic partners. Physical intimacy, which is, it's going to cover touching in a way that enhances feelings or closeness and desires.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, sexual intimacy, which combines the physical act of sex with the emotional closeness and trust. And to me, those really, really stood out. And I like how it kind of breaks them down into three separate ones. And to me, just the way that I am taking all this in is that you could literally have all three forms of intimacy with an individual, or you may just share two out of three, or one out of three, or
Mm-hmm.
none, depending on where you stand with the person or what phase of the relationship or romantic
Mm-hmm.
entanglement that you're in.
I love it. Oxford Languages is where I got the definition of intimacy just by itself, which was close familiarity or friendship, closeness between people. So to me, that was a good, like, solid intro. But when you go into those separate versions and the different quadrants, if you will, of what intimacy looks like in physical, in the emotional, you know, uh, in those areas, it really does start to make more of a, I guess, concentrated. You know what I'm saying? Like intimacy in terms of if we're just being emotionally close, if we're being physically close, it really can make or break a relationship too. One of the things that I saw looking at Psych Central, like going on there, the way the way they described intimacy, um, being something that a real relationship, whatever type of relationship it is, it cannot a relationship cannot grow without true intimacy. So if it's friendships, like we got to be able to share things with each other on a deeper level and be close in order for our relationship to grow. If we're a husband and wife or, lovers or whatever, you've got to be able to share those areas of intimacy, all of them, in order for that relationship to grow. And so this topic came up for me because I, again, being transparent, I've been on a real healing journey here the last 6 years, but for the last 6 months, I feel like I've gone to another level and really understanding myself, understanding why I'm still single, understanding why some relationships in my life didn't work. And one of those things I found was my attachment style, but intimacy within those relationships and how I attach to people. What I did when things didn't go well. um, how I could be emotionally withdrawn myself based on how I've had other relationships, you know, work or not work, and the right type of emotion being poured into me. It's very reciprocal when we're in an intimate relationship. So, what you get out is sometimes what you put in. But sometimes you don't always get what you put in from the other person. And that can really make or break your next relationships. Even with my own daughters, I have to really like um look at, you know, am I giving them enough of what they need based on sometimes what I felt like I needed as a daughter, you know? Um, so that's a lot, but Poppy, you did some really good research in the article you got. Talk to us about that because that thing was fire for me. I'm telling you, I was reading it and lapping it up.
Oh yeah, the sapial sexual side of me came out, and I was like, man, this is some
Hmm.
amazing content, and we will definitely share the article, which really, really stood out from my research. And some of this stuff I was already aware of, but this article just kind of encapsulates everything into a nice, clear way to kind of understand, because I do feel that a lot of people kind of attach intimacy solely into the physical stuff. However, um, from a lot of experts, and obviously this article, it highlighted that healthy relationships need a balance of intimacy and sex, and that sex doesn't always equal intimacy, because let's be honest, people can casually have sex
Hmm.
and this person may not be in your intimate circle, right? Or they may not know a damn thing about you on a personal level, your visions, your goals, your aspirations, all that good stuff. And listen, there's no right or wrong with that, but it's more so just to kind of create, clarity onto what the fundamental differences are between intimacy and sex, which
Right.
oftentimes can come together and do join forces. And obviously, being a man of 39 years old, I am well aware of what the differences are between just sex and intimate sex. Because to me, when you have an intimate relationship with someone, to me, it just makes everything better. Obviously, the sex, conversation, spending quality time together, all that good stuff.
Hmm. Hmm. And again, like I think you can't really because we're talking about dating relationships on the show, um having just sex is one area that can be very satisfying, gratifying, whatever. But if you don't have the emotional connection watered well, then things can happen. And that's one of the things that I read on the Psych Central article that I had was um you might have a great sexual relationship at first, everything's on, firing on all cylinders. But if that emotional piece does not get equal attention, then one of the partners may start to have sexual um, drying up, if you will, where they no longer wish to participate in the sexual component of the relationship because they're not getting their emotional stuff met. And it can be unintentional. And so when I first thought about this topic, I thought, well, are they talking about, withdrawal because you're trying to punish the other partner? Because I've seen that as well.
Yeah, and that's
I
an
never agreed with that at all, personally. That just something I feel like that's nothing you should do. Like punishing people with food or sex just feels wrong to me on so many levels. But if somebody is not getting their emotional needs met, they may very well not feel like having sex. And so it's not that they withdraw it because they're trying to punish, but they withdraw because they don't feel nourished.
no, and I and that's, I think I stated that on one of the back and forth dialogue that we had with the comments, that
Mhm.
sometimes the withholding of intimacy can happen unknowingly. And I'll give you an example, right? For example, medication, right? If you
Mhm.
suffer from something, or if you have diabetes and you got to take medicine for something, sometimes those things affect your sex drive. And when you don't acknowledge that, and then you are with a partner, or, a romantic partner, and they see that, hey, you're not, jumping on my bones like you used to, Sometimes it's the medicine, or maybe it could be your health, right? Like maybe you're,
Mhm.
getting, you're not healthy, or you've let yourself go, for so to speak, right? Like that's happened to me before when I got married, and I used to be a big fella, and I absolutely let myself go, and I absolutely needed to, do a lot better. But when you get married and you get comfortable,
Yeah,
that can easily happen where you kind of relax, or maybe put your health on the back burner, but that also can have damning effects on your relationship and yourself.
that's right. That's right. And honestly, if you aren't feeding yourself, if you aren't, feeling good about yourself and in a very grounded way, it can impact the relationship. And I think that's some of what I've experienced throughout a lot of my dating and marriage as well to some degree, is that sense of not feeling worthy or not feeling good enough about myself. And so you sort of start putting boundaries and borders around yourself, thinking because you don't feel worthy, the other person isn't going to see you as such, or they're not going to think you're good enough, or they're not going to feel like you're the right fit for them in a lot of ways, because you haven't nurtured your own inner self like you need to, or physical for that matter.
Yeah,
Uh,
and also let's keep in mind too that, like for example, right, some of my friends of that have children and whatnot, and we've had some of these conversations. Sometimes a woman who's just given birth just doesn't feel as confident in her body
that's right.
than prior to giving birth, so therefore her sexual desire or her sexual appetite is not the same.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that she doesn't, love her husband, right? Or wife, or whomever her romantic partner is. It just means that she's having a tough time coming to grips with her new reality, right? Or her post pregnancy body. And, again, falling into the whole medical scope, right? That
Mhm.
you don't feel sexy and you don't feel healthy. So therefore, you're not initiating sex as much, or you're not becoming as outgoing as you once were, because you don't feel good within your own skin. And to me, those would be a couple of examples, right, of how withholding intimacy can absolutely have a big impact. I'll throw another one in there.
Mhm.
Family, right? When you start having family and kids,
Yeah,
and you know this better than I do. When you're a mom, that's a 24/7 gig.
it does.
That.
It does, and you're tired. That's what a lot of people don't get. Just like you said with medicines, how that can change the scope of your sexuality. Being tired, and honestly, there were times when my children were babies that I was physically, mentally, spiritually, I was just exhausted beyond, like, comprehension. I had never known that type of exhaustion before, especially, like, when your kids are sick and they're up around the clock and you gotta keep your eye on them with fever or, whatever they've got going on, especially when they were little and couldn't talk, and I didn't know what was wrong with them, why they were screaming and, things were happening, especially, like, ear infections. Before you know what an ear infection is as a parent, that very first one is the worst and most scary, of any illness I think that my kid ever had, because I never experienced it as, in my adult life. I never knew what an ear infection was, and so when I had those, moments, they were so scary, and then I was up all night trying to figure out what was wrong. You can't call the doctor, you try to gotta wait till in the morning. It was just like, "Oh my god, I did not sign up and know that this was a part of what parenting was about," but, even now that my girls are older, if they're out and, not at home yet, I'm trying to wait up for them. So, if I feel like, I can't really give all of my time and attention to somebody just yet, because I feel like I need to get through, this part of their lives and my children, until I get them to adulthood. And then, even then, my mom is, parent to an almost 50-year-old. And, there's still things I think that my mom worries about me over, So, being able to pay good attention to a relationship, it takes balance and it work. One of the things that I really pay to with our listeners on Facebook who responded, and I'm telling you, those responses were fire. If you get a chance, please go to Jorge Medina or Nelsa Weber on Facebook and check out our post about withholding. So the topic, as we put it, people was discussing the importance, impact, and effects withholding intimacy in romantic relationships. Let's hear your thoughts and perspectives. So, one of the ones that jump right out at me, um, and this one was one that you kind of went back and forth on. Uh, One, Catherine M said, "I didn't do anything wrong, so why would I withhold intimacy? I shouldn't have to suffer." Um, and your response to her was great. That that the thing is that with that can get in trouble because a lot of people try, or they have such an amazing time in physical intimacy that it makes it challenging to walk away and will tolerate the BS and abuse way longer than they should. I wanted to jump right in right there because I think sometimes people put walls up because of past trauma. And so sometimes when they feel like somebody is acting similar to the way a past partner would, reacted or responded, then the withholding starts to begin, maybe involuntarily, because they've been triggered or because they feel like this is starting to head direction I've seen before.
Yeah, and
And
to me, that's a dangerous thing, right? To like, you really have to be very, very self-aware and very disciplined of what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And like I stated in that point, is that when you take on that approach, right, and you know that there's issues, you know that there's problems and red flags, but you still want to hang on, strictly because the physical aspect of the romance is on point, but everything else is chaos. To me, that's dangerous because oftentimes in abusive relationships, a lot of people hang on way longer than they should. And I've heard normally from these discussions that I've had with people, and just from examples that I have seen with my own eyes, have been normally number one, there's the balance of codependency is way off, right? Where one
right.
person is more reliant and dependent on the other. So obviously that's going to make it a challenge to just uproot yourself and leave, right? That would be one that jumps straight into my mind. Number two is great sex, right? Man
Mhm.
or woman, don't matter. When somebody gives you great sex, you don't forget that stuff, and having, and even it makes it even a lot easier to dismiss or to overlook some of the challenges and red flags because the intimacy was that amazing, right? Or, the
Yeah.
sexual experience was that amazing. And I can speak on that for men and women, right? Where
Mm.
I've seen like, okay, this seems very chaotic, but you keep hanging on. Well, look no further.
Well,
um,
not even just the physical act of sex, but when people are addicted to being in love and that emotional high that you can get people. There was some discussion around narcissism in some of the articles in Psych Central regarding people will get you on that run chase cycle, where the high of being chased and the thrill of trying to catch somebody, love bomb and gaslighting, all those things that happen where, people will love bomb you, get you back in, and then emotionally withdraw to put you back in a different space with them to keep the control over the relationship. So to me, that is almost just as dangerous, if not more, than even just the sexual withholding, because it's like you keep that cycle going of, okay, now you've had enough. I'm going to pull back and see what you do.
no,
And then that craving, the craving the person's attention and craving that emotional connection, and then not being able to get it until you're about ready to walk away, and then they hit you with that love bomb again, and keep the cycle going. So, um, again, that's so dangerous with those red flags to ignore that and just go for the high of the sex or the high of the emotion, as opposed to, are they really, feeding you consistently? Are y'all connecting consistently? And are you talking about your issues when there is one, as opposed to somebody just clamming up, shutting down, and saying, I won't give you any, or, I won't even talk to you if you're not pleasing me, or if you made me angry. Being able to really talk to one another through those emotional highs and lows is so important to really staying connected.
No, I agree, and it's definitely something to be very mindful. I know on the surface, I think most people understand the general concept of intimacy, but obviously it goes well beyond just what happens in the sheets. I do want to switch gears and also focus on some things to remember to help your intimacy to grow and expand, with whomever you choose to, right? One thing that stood out at me was anticipating your triggers.
Mm,
So if you know, right, that you have a trigger that makes it, challenging for you to open up to a person, whether that be emotionally or physically, then talking to that person about that up front can really set the stage for things to kind of operate smoother and efficiently. And by that I mean, if I know a woman that suffers from anxiety, right, or if I know a woman that has mental health issues, if she makes me aware of this and we have that conversation up front, then at least that puts me at ease to know what I'm up against and what I, want to do to accommodate her and vice versa, right? Me, myself, being epileptic, that is something that in the very beginning, I have to have these conversations with women, right? To let them know, hey, this is my reality. And I've had some women that, normally they're okay with it and they keep it moving, and it's not a big issue. Now I've have had a few women that either they thought that it was just too much or wasn't their speed or just not what they were looking for, which no harm done, it happens. I've done that to women as well, where if they have something and I feel like it's not a good fit for my lifestyle and my health, I've done the same, so no harm done. But to me, when you open up yourself with some of those little intimate details that you don't do with everybody, that in itself is creating a sort of bond because you are opening up to this person. and uh,
abs-
and on top of that, a lot of people sometimes, like men, for example, right? Like to me, I've heard from a lot of guys that, are trying to stimulate or turn on a woman and they can't get her to do that. To men, that can be very frustrating. But sometimes it's not even anything that the man is doing or isn't doing. It's all in, their head or their imagine or their side effects from medication, or they're thinking of other things or just not locked into the moment. So to me, having those discussions up front can save you a lot of trouble because subconsciously that man can start to see that, hey, I'm not turning her on, or vice versa, right? When a man is suffering from ED and the man kind of tries to brush it off or not address it, then the woman starts to think, okay, is it me or am I not sexy anymore? Does he not find me appealing? No, it's just the ED that he needs to work on. It's got nothing to do with what you're doing.
right, but the honesty is where the difference is, similar to what Dennett Merced talks about. Withholding, he's withholding information that could make a difference in their relationship, quite honestly, and wanting her to think it's her, as opposed to admitting I've got some, dysfunction in my physical self. But said, you know, withholding intimacy is deliberate and intentional as a form of punishment. Having a lack or lower amount of intimacy for a short period of time is simply an unintentional side effect of current miscommunication, or in the term, case of ED, maybe physical stuff with the relationship. And that's not the dynamics for everyone, but it's very common and understandable. So I think, again, like you said, having that conversation up front, if there is something going on with you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, even, then that allows the other person to know, well, first of all, do you even want to get involved if you're not involved yet? But then knowing that this is going to be a part of what we have to deal with in our relationship. And again, sometimes I will say in a relationship that can get tiring, in any sort of relationship, like having to deal with, some form of discussion or some sort of issue. It can get tiring for both partners depending on what's going on. But like that continued conversation, that continued communication to stay in there and try to work through it together, that builds that. that helps to move past, like, some couples who, ED was an issue because of medicine and, maybe the work, of one partner was very tiring and exhausting. So, not just assuming the worst, but getting in there and asking each other, "Hey, is everything all right? Do we need to do something different?" Um, Again, that's how you build collateral, I think, inside of a relationship. Like, the way I handle the down end determine how far we can go to the high end. But if I was just like, "Forget this, I'm about me and you won't give me any," then I'm out. Like, to me, that's such a blanket statement. Um, and if you're in a real relationship, a committed relationship, that can be so damaging to what you've tried to build, the other partner. So that is, one thing you want to try to avoid is just kind of rushing to conclusions. But if the person doesn't open up now, on the other side of that is like you got to open up and give me your truth. You got to trust to be able to handle you with care. And why are we in a long-term commitment if you don't?
No, and
Yeah.
I agree. I think that all those things are, super important to kind of get each other rowing in the same direction and on the right track. But also, um, creating intimacy is not just a physical thing. It can be, assuming that you're compatible, dreaming together, right? If you have similar or aspirations that you're both are looking to do, like traveling the world, right? Then sitting down and kind of talking about, hey, in the next 5 years, I want to go get a lake house, or I want to go to, Spain or something like that, like things like that, like sharing some of those inner dreams that you either keep to yourself or only people that are close to you. Talking about your vulnerabilities and insecurities. I know that's a tough conversation, and I know that's not something that we have with everyone, but those people that you do have it with, you got to think that and believe that, hey, these are people that rock with me and, are ride or die with me, for, lack of a better term. From an intimate perspective, physical intimacy, cuddling. It's just cuddling and the subtle touching, or just showing a nurturing side can also help your intimacy grow with your romantic partner or partners. um, Also, talking openly, right? Like discussing that up front can really solidify, right, where you stand. And that way you don't have to leave your partner wondering, was it me? Was it my performance? Was it because I, gained a few pounds? Like all those things can, be diffused by just simple, honest conversations.
Yes. Yes. There is intimacy work out here um in in the world. One of those, and I'm gonna try to find it. But one of those is where partners learn to just sit with each other, holding each other's hands, learning to breathe together, doing mindfulness work together. And I know that probably sounds like, what in the world, Nelsa? But it is so powerful to be able to sit with a person, whether it's a friend, whether it's a relative, whether it's, your love partner, but to be able to sit in space together quietly, first of all, without a whole bunch of words, just holding each other's hands, breathing in and out. Y'all, when I tell y'all the power in that type of connection, learning to sit and touch each other gently, like you were talking about cuddling, where we're not even talking about sexual intimacy at this point, but just learning what soft touch feels like again, learning to kiss each other again. Um, there are some real activities that are available to couples now, and even couples therapy, those things where you learn how to talk to each other again and reconnect to each other again are valuable tools if you will be open. And like you said, the word vulnerable comes to mind with all of this, with intimacy. Like sometimes we're withholding because we don't want to be the soft one. We don't want to feel like we're being weak. We don't want to feel like we're being foolish. um but sometimes it requires that level of faith that if I put myself out here in my truest, honest form, then the results can be like amazing for people. And I've seen that. I've seen couples get to the place where they thought they were ready to walk away and end it all as far as divorce or breaking up or whatever. But one person stops being so prideful about sharing their truth about, okay, let's go back to when we were dating. What was the good stuff that you saw in the other person? um, really kind of winding the clock back to those places where you fell in love or you first found love with each other, and being able to call back that sense of newness in your relationship. But if one of you is, like, this is how I am and this is how it's going to be, like, you get to control the whole narrative, and that's not fair when you have a partnership. And so I would definitely call on, as a coach, be careful with the blanket statements that you use with your partner. You're always, I never, um, this is what it's going to be, take it or leave it. Those kinds of stiff arm statements really do shut down the desire to communicate and to really keep moving forward.
No, I agree, and it's definitely something that you have to really measure your words and be aware. To me, it boils down to when you're trying to grow the intimacy with a person, right? I think it's important that you feel comfortable being you around that person, because if you do not feel comfortable being you around this person that you are trying to romantically be involved with, that's going to be a problem. It may not be a problem up front because you're, using the dating representative vibes to kind of get by, but eventually for something long term, because remember, the more comfortable we get, the more familiar we get with each other, the more that people start to show a lot of sides that maybe they withhold or that they try to stash away, for lack of a better term, just so that you quote unquote like them. And to me, that's a sucker's bet, because eventually that's going to come out. And the thing is that it comes out when it's too late and you're already hooked on this person, or you already had your wagon on this person. And
Mm.
now what? So to me, it's very important to be who you are from the very beginning. And obviously, when it comes to some of the intimate stuff and some of the private stuff, it should be like a process, right? I mean, you don't want to lay all this stuff out on the first date on a person, but as you continue to spend time together, as you continue to get to know each other, it should be like, leveling up and like a marathon, so to speak, not something where, all right, we got 2 dates to get to know each other and go.
That right. That's right. Um, the Brick City Buddha is one of the Instagram um people that I follow. Um, and he does some talk where people do some like deep sexual detox, if you will. Um, married couples doing oh gosh, the word just threw would jump right out of my mouth, but no sex for a while on purpose.
What?
Purpose. Uh, celibacy, if you will, for a period of time so that you can reconnect emotionally. Some interesting work on there. He's a meditation guru, has a podcast called Remembering Me. He's a life coach. But anyway, if you check him out on it's brick underscore city CITI underscore Buddha. And so it's an interesting pieces on there where you see couples learning to reconnect emotionally through celibacy, withholding sex, both of them, for the purpose of trying to move the relationship forward. And I was like, man, you got to be in a really good place, though, where
Yeah, I feel like that to me is a slippery slope, because if you're in a strong relationship, then I could see how that would work out. Like if you're just doing that just to kind of
reinforce.
try reinforce, or just to kind of do something together. and doing something different to kind of, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Sometimes, a little time apart can
Right.
be good, a little time,
It
but
may miss
once,
each other a little bit or whatever. Yeah.
right. But I think to me, it's important to figure out what this time entails, because if you get too comfortable being apart from each other, then I feel like that could have adverse effects to the exercise. And I've talked to, a lot of my friends who are married and happily married, and oftentimes one thing that I have heard is that they have, great chemistry in the bedroom. And obviously that's not a secret, but best believe that are people that are happily married definitely get it in. That's just the reality of it. And obviously that's part of the intimate aspect that comes with being in a romantic relationship with someone, and obviously one that's very integral and important.
Exactly. And I don't think the purpose of this exercise is to go for long periods of by no means. I get that impression. However, I think, you know, again, where sex doesn't become the be all end all in the relationship, like making sure every area of intimacy is addressed and that we're not just, because the sex is good, that we're not just glossing over some other things that may need some work. So again, I hear what you're saying and I totally agree with it because I've never been one of those people that felt like withholding in any way is good for the relationship, especially as a punishment. I just don't agree with that. Don't withhold my food, don't withhold my pleasure. But having periods of time where we can work on looking at all, it's like, am I giving you what you need emotionally? Am I supporting you spiritually? Am I, you know, meeting your need and you're meeting mine when it comes to our intellectual connection? Like all those things are so important, not just the sex. So, but the sex is important too. Now, don't get it twisted.
Don't get it twisted.
That's not what we're saying.
No,
Uh,
yeah, and to me, I think also, you have to have a good pulse on your romantic relationships, right? Because if you're already on thin ice, and then you start to drift apart into from the emotional aspect, and now it's spilling over into the physical aspect, then you are teetering and flirting with the prospects that, hey, we may not continue this, because to me oftentimes that seems to be a common denominator when the relationship is literally dying running in front of your eyes, is when you stop having and sharing those intimate moments, whether it be emotional and physical.
that's right. You become roommates.
Yep, and shitty roommates at that.
At that, yes.
It's
But
not the
anyway,
fun kind of roommates. It's like,
hey,
oh,
like,
when are you leaving?
listen, like, it's time for this to end. Look, I'm gonna need you to go, or you gonna
like
got to go.
what's that saying goes? Y'all don't gotta go home, but you gotta get the hell up out
I-
of here.
This has been another awesome, awesome podcast with you, Poppy. Thank you to everybody who is a faithful listener. If you have just experienced us for the first time, you can follow us on Spotify. You can follow us on the Relationship Cycle with Jorge and Nelsa on our YouTube channel, and any other outlet where you can get podcasts. So you can find us out there in listening land. So this has been awesome. Thank you to our listeners who follow us on Facebook and put your input in for each topic. We got some other hot ones coming through just in time for Love Day, right, Poppy?
I mean, yeah, we definitely hit them with a good heavy topic right before the Valentine's Day celebration. So yeah, I think this was definitely a great discussion, a very deep discussion, and to me, it kind of gave me clarity, because yeah, I pretty much had a pretty good grasp on what intimacy meant, but I never really thought about it, as far as breaking it down into different fragments, which I thought was very cool and very interesting. Just to kind of put a bow on the conversation, for those that do have romantic partners or in relationships, if you want to maybe try to grow together with that intimacy, right? Maybe step out of your comfort zone together. Maybe do something for the first time together. Those are all like things that can definitely help you grow within your relationship. And it'd also be a good experience. And there's just something to be said about doing something for the first time ever with a person. Like to me, whenever I've done first things with, whomever, I always remember who I did it with. So imagine that when it's somebody that you care for deeply and that you love, it's just gonna set, that passion on fire even more.
I love it. I love it. Well, Poppy, until next time.
Have a good day, good people. Buenas noches. Thanks for joining us today on the Relationship Cycle with Jorge and Nelsa. Do you have show ideas? Email us at jorgeandnelsa@gmail.com. Follow us on Spotify or anchor.fm for more great shows.